somebody said, oh, it says My Sweet Satan in it. And I thought, oh, gosh, it's hard enough writing the music one way round rather than that way.
What if I told you the man who wrote the greatest rock anthem of all time almost destroyed his career before it began? Before Led Zeppelin sold 300 million albums, before Stairway became a religion, Jimmy Page was a 21-year-old burnout, a guitar prodigy turned studio ghost, playing for pennies while critics called him washed up. This is the story of how a dying artist became a god, how Jimmy Page didn't just reinvent rock music, he weaponized it. But to understand the myth, we need to meet the boy who heard demons in the silence. James Patrick Page, better known as Jimmy, he was born on the 9th of January 1944 in Heston, Middlesex, England. His parents, James Patrick Page Sr., a factory personnel manager, and Patricia Elizabeth Gaffigan, a doctor's secretary, had no idea their quiet, introverted son would one day deafen stadiums with a guitar. Jimmy wasn't your average kid. While others played football, he'd spend hours dissecting records Elvis, blues legends like Elmore James. At 12, he stumbled upon a beat-up Spanish guitar in his new home in Epsom. No lessons, no YouTube tutorials, just raw obsession. By 13, he was sneaking into London blues clubs, soaking up the chaos. But here's the twist, Jimmy almost quit. His crippling stage fright made him vomit before gigs. Critics called him too delicate for rock. So, what changed? Two words: art school. At Sutton Art College, he studied painting, but secretly practiced guitar 8 hours a day. By 18, he was a session musician for The Who, the Kinks' ghostwriting riffs that made stars famous, while he stayed invisible. Think about that. The future god of rock was a nameless studio rat, paid £5 per song, but those sleepless nights forged his secret weapon, perfectionism. He'd re-record solos 30 times until they felt like spales. But how did this shy, self-taught kid from the suburbs become the most feared guitarist on earth? To find out, we need to dig into the wild, untold story of his early years. Behind the rock star persona, Jimmy Page's life was a tapestry of quiet loves and quiet losses. His first marriage, to model Charlotte Martin in 1986, lasted nearly a decade and gave him his only biological child, a daughter, Scarlett. But here's the twist. Scarlett wasn't just his child, she became his muse. In interviews, Jimmy called Scarlett his anchor during Led Zeppelin's chaotic reunion attempts, but fame strained his family life. After divorcing Charlotte, he married Jimena Gomez Paracha in 1995, a Peruvian artist 30 years his junior. They had 2 children, a daughter named Zofia Jade Page and a son named Ashen Josen Page, but even this fairytale crumbled. By 2008, they divorced, and Jimmy retreated into isolation. But here's what fans rarely saw: Jimmy's softer side. He adopted his stepdaughter, Jana, during his marriage to Jimena, and friends say he'd cancel tour to attend her school plays. Even during Led Zeppelin's 2007 reunion, he insisted on no rehearsals after 6 p.m. family time. And then came Scarlett Sabbath, a poet 44 years his junior. Since 2014, they've been inseparable. Critics raised eyebrows, but Jimmy doesn't care. At 80, he calls her his creative spark, even producing her spoken word albums. Love, for him, isn't about age, it's about finding someone who speaks the same secret language. But how did a boy raised in post-war England, a world of ration cards and bomb shelters, develop this hunger for connection and chaos? Jimmy Page's story begins in the ashes of World War II. Born in 1944 in Heston, a quiet London suburb, his childhood was defined by 2 things: ration books and silence. His parents moved constantly, first to Feltham, then to Epsom, chasing stability in a shattered England. But young Jimmy found his escape not in toys, but in sound. At 12, he discovered a forgotten Spanish guitar in his new home. No teacher, no sheet music, just raw intuition. He'd lock himself in his room for hours, mimicking Elvis records note for note. But here's the twist: Jimmy was painfully shy. His first school band, he quit after 1 gig because he vomited from stage fright. While classmates mocked his weird obsession with blues records, Jimmy found solace in art. At 15, he enrolled at Sutton Art College, dreaming of becoming a painter. But fate had other plans. By day, he sketched nudes. By night, he haunted London's blues clubs, absorbing the raw energy of Helen Wolf and Muddy Waters. Then came the crossroads. At 18, Jimmy faced a choice: finish art school or chase music. He dropped out, telling his furious parents, "I'll earn more as a guitarist." They laughed. But within months, he was a session musician for legends like The Who and the Kinks, though you'd never know it. His name wasn't on the albums, just his sound. But how did this nameless studio wizard become the most dangerous guitarist alive? To find out, we need to dive into the chaos of the 1960s, a decade that would turn Jimmy Page from a ghost into a god. Jimmy Page's education wasn't in music, it was in rebellion. At 15, he enrolled at Sutton Art College, dreaming of painting surrealist masterpieces. But while his classmates sketched still lifes, Jimmy was sneaking off to London's blues dens, guitar in hand. By 1962, he dropped out, telling his furious parents, "I'll make more money as a guitarist." They scoffed, but within months, he was proven right. Here's the twist. Before Stairway to Heaven, Jimmy was the ghost behind British rock's biggest hits. He played on the Kinks' You Really Got Me, though it's still debated, the Rolling Stones, Heart of Stone, and even Tom Jones. It's not unusual, but you'd never know his name wasn't on the albums. He was a hired gun, paid to make stars sound legendary while staying invisible. Why the secrecy? Labels feared fans wouldn't buy authentic rock if they knew session players existed. But Jimmy didn't care. He treated guitar like a science, recording solos 30 times until they felt like spales. By 1966, he was the most in-demand guitarist in London, until a band called the Yardbirds came knocking. When Eric Clapton quit the Yardbirds, they didn't hire Jimmy as lead guitarist. Nope, they shoved him on bass. But when Jeff Beck joined, Jimmy switched to guitar, and their duo became the blueprint for rock's future. Crowds went wild until the band imploded in 1968. Most would have quit. Jimmy, he scribbled for words on a napkin, Led Zeppelin later led. But how did a collapsing band birth the greatest rock act of all time? To find out, we're diving into the chaos, ego, and genius that created Led Zeppelin. In 1968, Jimmy Page did the unthinkable. He turned the ashes of a dying band into the greatest rock and roll dynasty of all time. Led Zeppelin wasn't just a band, it was a revolution. Their self-titled debut sold 8 million copies in a year. But Jimmy wasn't satisfied. He wanted to melt minds. And he did. When Stairway to Heaven dropped, critics called it pretentious. Fans, they treated it like scripture. The 8-minute epic became the most requested song in radio history, despite never being released as a single. Why? Because Jimmy refused to cheapen it. Meanwhile, Zeppelin shattered attendance records, like their 1977 Tampa Stadium show for 76,000 to 129 fans, a record unbroken for decades. But here's the kicker, Jimmy wasn't just a guitarist. He was Led Zeppelin's producer, arranger, and sonic mad scientist. He pioneered the reverse echo in You Shook Me, recorded John Bonham's drums in Stairwells for That When the Levee Breaks Thunder, and yes, he really did use a violin bow on Dazed and Confused. The result? 300 million albums sold, a chart-topping LPS, a 2007 reunion show that drew 20 million ticket requests for just one night. And the accolades? How about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Twice. First with Led Zeppelin in 1995, then with the Yardbirds in 1992, a Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award, even an Olympic honor. He performed at the 2008 Beijing closing ceremony. But Jimmy's proudest moment, hearing a kid play Stairway wrong, and realizing it's now theirs to reinvent. But with fame this colossal, how did it translate into power, wealth, and a legacy that still dominates rock 50 years later? Jimmy Page didn't just invent rock stardom, he monetized it. With a net worth of $200 million, he's truly the sultan of riff royalties. But here's the kicker. Led Zeppelin's music still earns $20 million a year, and Jimmy gets 40% of it. Why? Because he owns the master tapes, a power move most artists only dream of. While bands like the Beatles lost their catalogs, Jimmy kept his. Every stream of Stairway, every Black Dog sync in a Marvel movie cha-ching, even the Cadillac ad using rock and roll. That's Jimmy cashing checks in his 70s. But his genius wasn't just in music, it was in branding. He launched Swan Song Records in 1974, signing acts like Bad Company and raking in profits. Today, his 1959 Les Pauls sell for millions, and his Zoso symbol is tattooed on fans worldwide. But Jimmy's real power, influence. Eddie Van Halen called him the architect, while Slash admits, without Page, there's no Guns N' Roses. Professionally, he's a godfather. His production tricks, like miking drums 20 feet away for That When the Levee Breaks Boom, are still taught in studios. The 2007 Led Zeppelin reunion drew 20 million ticket requests for one show. Even now, at 80, he's remastering Zeppelin's catalog in Dolby Atmos, ensuring his riffs outlive us all. But how does a man worth $100 million live when he's not rewriting rock history? From secret castles to occult libraries, let's peek behind the velvet curtain. Jimmy Page doesn't just live, he curates a myth. His 18th century London mansion, the Tower House, isn't a home, it's a temple. Filled with occult relics, Aleister Crowley manuscripts, and a staircase designed to mimic a spiral guitar riff, it's where rock's greatest enigma vanishes for months at a time. But Jimmy's obsessions aren't just dark. He owns a second mansion, a boathouse on the Thames, where he paints watercolor landscapes. Then there's his $20 million guitar vault, housing his 59 Les Paul and the double-neck SG that birthed Stairway. But here's the twist, he's terrified of flying. Instead, he sails vintage yachts to festivals, with his guitars strapped to the mast. And the hobbies? Let's just say Jimmy's not your average retiree. He's a licensed pilot despite the fear of flying, a master chess player, and a voracious rare book collector. His prize? A 15th century grimoire bought for £300,000. But his true passion? Preserving music history. He spent decades remastering Zeppelin's tapes, once saying, "I owe it to the 16-year-old kid who saved lunch money for our albums." But beneath the mystique lies a soft side. Since 2014, he's donated millions to Brazil's Amazon rainforest, even funding a reserve in his daughter Scarlett's name. And when he's not battling record labels, he's mentoring young musicians like the Black Keys' Dan Auerbach, who call him the Yoda of riffs. But what about the rumors, the scandals, the stories even die-hard fans don't know? Jimmy Page isn't just a rock god, he's rock's greatest mystery. Let's crack open the vault. Did you know he bought Aleister Crowley's infamous Loch Ness estate, Boleskine House, in 1970? He restored its occult rituals until it burned down in 2019. Rumor says he salvaged Crowley's original dagger. Coincidence, or part of the Stairway pact? Speaking of Stairway, here's a bombshell. The song's never been streamed online. Jimmy refuses to release it digitally, calling it sacred. But that's not the wildest part. In 2016, he lost a plagiarism lawsuit over its intro, yet still won. How? The statute of limitations expired. The verdict? Too legendary to sue. And those cryptic symbols on Led Zeppelin 4. They're not just art, they're his personal sigils. The Zoso, his emblem for invoking chaos. But Jimmy's quirks aren't all dark. He's a licensed pilot terrified of flying, a Jeopardy champion in the 70s, and once turned down $10 million to play Stairway at a billionaire's birthday. His reason? It's not a jukebox. Then there's the real Jimmy Page, the one who anonymously produced albums for folk artists, the one who saved a fan's life in 1975 by dragging him backstage during a riot, the one who quietly mentors young guitarists, telling them, "Steal my riffs, but make them yours." From occult obsession to secret philanthropy, Jimmy Page defies every rock star cliché. He's a paradox, a shy introvert who commands stages like a warlock, a perfectionist who thrives on chaos, a recluse who's inspired millions. And at 80, he's still remastering Zeppelin's tapes, ensuring that long after he's gone, the riffs remain. So, was it talent or a deal with something darker? Either way, Jimmy Page didn't just conquer rock and roll, he rewrote its soul. If you think Jimmy Page's secrets are wild, wait until you hear about the rock star who's rewriting the rulebook in 2025. Axl Rose isn't just making a comeback, he's igniting a war with the music industry and winning. But this story, it's vanishing soon. Click on the video that appears on the screen now to uncover the explosive truth before it's buried. Subscribe and ring the bell because legends like Jimmy and Axl don't wait, and neither should you.